You devil-worshipping friends are the question of Lucifer, a record of things seen and heard, according to the evidence of initiates. Oh, seen and heard in the secret societies. So, chapter 9 is how Lucifer is unmasked. Let's see if we can finish this in one video. Mele Doctor Batel is a mighty hunter before the face of the Lord in the land of masonry, and through the whole country of Hiram. Great also is Diana of the Palladians. After their monumental revelations and confessions, those of all other succeeders and penitents who have come out of the mastery of iniquity are as moonlight into sunlight, and as water into wine. My readers, in the two previous chapters, have drunk raw spirit, and must now qualify it, after the Scottish fashion. The aqueous intellectuality and quiet stream of unpretending disposition peculiar to M. John Kostka will well be adapted to modify undue exaltations and restore order to a universe which has been intoxicated by sorcerers. He will show us how Lucifer is unmasked, and in an undemonstrative and gentlemanly fashion, by a late Gnostic and initiate of the 33rd degree. Remember sorcery? Sacerdotal, it's pronounced different ways, apparently. Ritual use of drugs is part of the definition there. We can also say sorcery comes from the term to sorcel, put things to chance. But wait, don't they have wine in the Mass? Or don't they have representative wine where it's not in place? He writes, as he frankly tells us, in a spirit of reparation and gratitude, having commerced freely with devils during a long series of unholy years. Blessed be the omnipotent Lord, and blessed the loving kindness which drew me out of the abyss. To glorify these, I unmask the fallen angel. They're afraid of the unknown, that's their problem. The delicacy of the motive and its setting of the chivalrous sentiment will be appreciated even by the victim, and the tenderness of the treatment will prompt Lucifer to pardon his rivaler, who has been already pardoned by M. Pappus for betraying the order of the Martinist, and to do justice towards an amiable writer who has scarcely requisited qualities for seriously damaging or advancing any cause. It may be kind to add that he has considerably exaggerated his own case after a careful examination of his statement, which is exceedingly naive. Oh, okay, I am tempted to conclude that he has never been near an abyss, and he is innocent of either height or depth, and so far from having ever plunged into the infernal void, he has scarcely so much as paddled in a purgatorial puddle. His guilty transcendental experiences are, in reality, the most infantile afternoon occultism, and his drawing room diablerie might be appropriately symbolized by the paper-speaking tube of our old friend John King, and there's nothing in it when the voice is not speaking, and there's nothing in it when it is. And so we see the sun and the moon reference, see the demonization of the female, so any path that's kind of might put a woman as equal, or exalt the status of a woman. Oh no, that must be demonic. That's literally what they're saying. Since this conversation, M. John Kostka has exhibited much harmless devotion towards Joan of Arc, an enthusiasm which originated among occultists, for he has pious memories of Saint Stanislaus Kostka, for which dispositions I trust that all my readers will have the complacence to commend him. He writes furthermore, in the decline of maturity, on the threshold of age, in the late autumn of life, which is his dropsical method of saying that he is past 60, and he veils a futile name under the patronymic of his favorite saint, Jean Kostka, is not Jean Kostka, but is without intent to deceive that he evades any possible responsibility in connection with his concealed identity. It is a kind of pious self-effacement. I hope everyone will believe what he says and give him all credit for having turned towards the outraged church in matters of evidence. Pseudonymous statements are, however, objectionable, and I therefore identify our witness as Jules Doinel, who was chiefly concerned in the restoration of the Gnosis and the establishment of a Gnostic church in Paris in the year 1890, and is moreover not unknown as a Masonic orator, and in the world of les lettres, Pappas, with the generosity of a mystic, can only speak well of the pious enthusiast who has betrayed his cause and scandalized the school he represents, and explains that Jules Doinel is a marvelous poet, deficient in the scientific culture which might have enabled him to explain in a peaceable fashion the phenomena squandered upon him by the world invisible, so that there were only two courses open for him: renunciation of the transcendental path or madness. Let us bless heaven that the patriarch of the Gnosis has selected the former. It is possibly showing gratitude for small mercies, because our friend has saved his reason, but is blood guilty in the matter of common sense. Meanwhile, the widowed Gnosis illuminates its Ichabod and the cryptic courtiers of Paris, lions, and so forth. Everyone may agree with M. Pappas that Jean Kostka is a very pretty writer, in a quiet and shallow way, but with possibly one exception. He must have withheld the flower of his phenomena in order of the spirit, for his book is full of sentimental and vapid experiences of the school misorder, while over the light and spongy soil he has now set the ponderous paving stones of his new explanation, and toils forward on the road of unreason. This apart, John Kostka was evidently for many years familiar with the centers and workings of all the crosslights of esoteric thought, which meet and interlace in the night of French common thought. He has dwelt among Gnostics, Martionists, modern Abagenses, and spiritualists. Spiritualists is a way that you can translate the term ekist for my New Age religion playlist, but anyways. He appears to have been identified with all, and though he does not accuse himself of the capital offense of conscious Satanism, he has been quite well acquainted with Satanism, and next best to seeing the devil oneself, and he has known many who have. In those days, he tells us that Lucifer could be visited, Chez Louis, in an earthly tabernacle, situated in an unfrequented street, from whence the lointain bruissement du peri nocturne might be heard by the pensive traveller, if he were not too intent on diabolizing. Now he has found out that Lucifer was chez lui everywhere. Je vis Satan es ses dogmes. All his psychic faculties have concentrated in the transcendental apparatus for scenting devildom, and he mournfully comes forward to tell us, with a variation of Fluid's utterance, Diabolus in quam diabolus oblique repertus est, et omnia diabolus, et diabolos. Let it suffice to say that the demonologists have invented nothing and have exaggerated nothing. To the spiritualist, Lucifer is John King, and Allan Kardec to the Gnostics. He is the Gnosis. Simon Magus, one of the individuals responsible for the founding of Christianity, Helen and Noia, and anything that comes handy from the Nile Valley in the 4th century to the Martinists. He is the philosophe inconu to the Albigenses. If there are Parisian Albigenses, he is whatever Albigenses invoke. If they invoke anything to Madame X, he is Mary Stuart to his own adepts. Within sound of lointain bruissement, he is Juen Hame Blonde Ox Yaux Bleas, whom I understand to have worn a dalmatic, and to have been curiously indebted to the author of Aut Dabalus Aut Nihil for the Theosophist. He is that illustrious demoniac, Madame Blavatsky. His innate delicacy leads him to the permutation of the Typhon V. And then Freemasonry. It goes without saying that the little horn of Lucifer has displaced all other horns in all the grades and lodges, that the fraternity is his throne and his footstool, and the city of the great king. If we buttonhole John Kostka and ask him to tell us, confidentially, and upon honor, what it is that has changed his views, making him discover the lesser of Baal Zebub. Baal, master, Zebub, of flying things, not birds, like insects and stuff, is probably the origin. Where he once saw the smile of the spiritual Eos, he turns Trappist at once and goes in retreat with M. Husamans. There is not a syllable of information in all his Bua volume as to any intellectual process through which he passed on the way, and I suspect that his conversion partook of the nature of a penetration to speak his own language, and was not an intellectual operation, but a sudden volte-face. And John Kostka has changed his pince-nez, and that is the whole secret. So, in a limited tribes of Israel and all that other sort of way of thinking, certainly any other light bringer, any other illumined one must be a devil himself. Every other sect has the Satan at its origin. No wonder why you had so many crusades and pogroms and Holocaust and that sort of thing. The reason why I cannot tell, but now I hold it comes from hell. Here is the proof positive he has nothing in the shape of an accusation. He gets his Lucifer interpretation out of everything with which he has cut off correspondence by a very simple and civil process of installation. I sense it. Je vis Lucifer. Thus, the order of the Knights of Perfect Silence invite their initiates to become architects of the holy city, John Kostka, in possession of the latest tip, says, "Read hell!" The Martionists are concerned with the creation of Adam Kadmon, the ideal humanity. John Kostka tells you that they are concerned with nothing of the sort, and that Satan is the only person who can really put us up to the secret, which is curious because he immediately advises us himself that the exercise of the three cardinal virtues to the profit of Lucifer is the sum of the whole mystery, and the real sus intendu of Martinism. The Masonic grades from apprentice, companion, master, through Knight Rose Cross to Knight Kadosh, and so forward, are exploited after the same manner by the baldest of processes, that of inverting everything. For example, the sacred word of the 33rd degree in the French Rite, namely Sovereign Grand Inspector General, is Deus meamque justice. That signifies, says John Costco, that Lucifer is the sole God, and that the material, like the spiritual world of right, belongs to him. No, it's not saying that. If you inquire the process of extraction by which he gets that result, he answers, "I must admit that I have had only a general intuition, but I assure you that it's immense." And he will immediately cite you a password and invite you to take every letter individually and fit to it just that word, which is by another intuition he perceives belongs to it, that you will see for yourself. Thus, the Kadash term, Nakam, which signifies vengeance, having been duly anatomized, will come out as follows. Nex exterminatio Christi adversarii magni, to wit, death, extermination of Christ, the great enemy. Wicked and willy John Kostka, to outrage the decencies of orthography, and against all reason write the name of the liberator with a K, thereby concealing the true meaning, which has revealed for the first time as follows. Nequaquam eretis Kostka aritum magister, which being interpreted still further signifies that there was never such a clumsy device. Now, it goes without saying that a writer with these methods is not to be taken seriously, but is worthwhile to appreciate the quality of intelligence, which is received with acclamation by the Catholic Church in France as soon as it comes over to the enemy. Lucifer Unmasked appears originally in the pages of the newspaper La Verite, and it was immediately reproduced in Spanish by the Union Católica. The clerical press boomed full-mouthed salvas in its honor, and His Eminence Cardinal Parocchi has blessed book or author or both, and believes that it will make a great impression, undoubtedly contributing to enlighten minds and lead them back to God. John Kostka, as already indicated, is a spiritual sentimentalist, and he has passed by a rapid transition common to such natures, from the Gnostic transcendental initiate to the pious Catholic devotee, and he will make an excellent Lourdes pilgrim As there will be no need to recur to him again, it will be permissible to justify my criticism by some account of his personal experiences. M. Pappus speaks of him as the founder and patriarch of the Gnostic Church, of the same patriarch and primitive John Kostka. He also speaks as of another person, recites the fact of his conversion, and hopes he will do better work for the Church of God than he has done for Lucifer, which is Dr. Jekyll, and which Mr. Hyde, in this duadic personality, is not of serious consequence, as they have both got into a better way of thinking and acting. Now, since his demission from these high functions, John Kostka has found that the chief piece of Gnostic devilry is in denying that the lost angels are eternally damned. On this point, he has attained to what is rare to him, a touch of personal animosity to supply the antipodes of heaven, let us say, with a lethal chamber as a meaner order than that of theological charity does here, in the interest of homeless and snappy dogs, would in his present state of grace seem a very wicked proposition. Remember, the antipodes of Mecca, Medina, Jerusalem, Damascus, and, the Great Pyramid too, are in the South Pacific. In the South Pacific. The eclipse on the 2nd is going to be dipping into the South Pacific. The Lovecraftian stories say that Relia is in the South Pacific. So that's an antipode note for you. Well, in 1890, John Kostka was invited, as I understand, by the chief of the Gnostic Church, that is, by himself, to a chapel in the palace of a lady who figures frequently in his pages under the name of Madame X. The author takes great credit for concealing her real titles, but he has failed to conceal her identity, and there can be no harm in saying that the reference is to Lady Caithness. He was present upon serious business, in fact, nothing short of assisting at a séance. A medium had been secured. The proceedings began. Rappings became audible. An intelligence desired to communicate, and finally there was a message with a name given. It was Lucia Bell, whom you know as Lucifer. To this day, John Kostka does not seem conscious of any element of idiocy in the variation of the old-fashioned name. In the revelation which followed, the intelligence, who seemed amiable disposed, despite his sinister connections, informed the circle that, like Jesus, he was engendered eternally from God, and that he was exiled from the Pleroma, and that he was the Sophia Achamoth of Valentine, the Helen Enoia of Simon Magus, the thought of God, which had become anathema, and that he was now in search of love and consolation, both of which might take shape in a Gnostic church, and would be highly acceptable. There is, so to speak, a commercial element in the overtures which dries up the feeling of piety, or one might be exceedingly sorry for this lost chord of eternal thought, hoping charitably that we should still somehow hear in it heaven. Arano, Pleroma, Enoia, all terms. The Gnostic and Christian Satanism series that I did might be important to look at to kind of understand some of that. But in Gnosticism and pre-Christian writing, these terms that appear in the Bible are given different terms. The Pleroma, more like being, the otherworldly beings. Some people say in that context it would be the jinn. But we also have, the Aranu would be the Malaika. So that means the fire means the sort of the creation before the cosmic creation in certain mythologies, which would the jinn and the Malaika before the humans obviously would be in order, but anyways. Since his conversion, the unpretentious marvel of this seance has been a dire trouble to John Kostka, partially on account of its eschatology, but still more because the sitters were conscious at its close of a breath passing over their faces, while he himself felt the presence of lips against his own. Poor John Kostka! They were all abased on their knees, which happens occasionally, even at seances, to pious people in Paris. And he concludes that he was kissed by Helena Enoia, alias Lucifer, alias Luciabel, who is also described on the charge sheet of Orthodox theology by other and more objectionable titles. The shameful memory causes him to exclaim fervently, "May he who purged the lips of Isaiah with a burning coal deign to purify mine by the sacred kiss of penitence and pardon in osculo sancto." Instead of osculum infame. I also have a video about that. But there is a touch of sublimity in that. And the Basia of Baal Zebub. Zebub would be the yellowness, the goldenness, the copulate. Zebul is the copulator. Master of copulation. But Zebub would be, would refer to pus and yellowness and sick, sort of a disease sort of character. May well enough be more demoralizing than those of Secundus. At the time, however, he founded the Gnostic Church. We become acquainted with ghosts after various manners, according to our psychic condition. There is spontaneous and accidental ghost, who is seldom caught in the act. There is the able-bodied, materialized ghost, whom we catch in the act occasionally and preserve our mental balance by clinging to his watch chain and seals, that they may be distinguished as the timeless ghost and the ghost who occasionally does time. Over and above these two generic specimens, there is the ghost that throws, who is separable from the ghost that hurls. As our French friends put it, to hurl is to utter objectionable and unreasonable yells, preferably in the dead of night and in lonely places. This ghost is much sought after by specialists. Because there's something wrong in their head. The one that's going to disturb me in the night, that's the one I want to go for. Not the one that may, be agreeable. It would be tedious to name all the varieties, but I guarantee the unequipped that all known specimens have been carefully labeled, except possibly the odorous ghost. The ghost, that is to say, who manifests exclusively to the olfactory organ. That is an exceedingly withdrawn and appreciable kind, but it is familiar to John Kostka, who is a connoisseur of the smell supernatural and is a trained psychic knows. He can distinguish between the spiritual perfume which characterizes, let us say, Saint Stanislaus, and the odorum suavitatis of Lucifer. He is also an authority on conditions, and gives a ravishing description of the voluptuous enervation diffused over all his limbs when he had a private memorandum from Isis by means of raps during the reception of a master in a blue lodge. On this occasion, he tells us that he was inspired to pronounce one of his most wicked and dangerous Masonic discourses. Dear M. Kostka, dynamite would lose its destroying power in his harmless hands. At another function, but this was in a red lodge, he was overwhelmed by the presence of Lucifer, who elected and commissioned him to fight in his cause. It was a moment of unwonted intelligence. These are his own words, and he agreed so incompetence chose its minister, and Frater Daedalus again showed himself a short-sighted rogue, because has not his emissary converted and passed over to the makers of pilgrimages? M. Kostka also at this time was so wicked as to be guilty of a pact, but he reserved 2 points: the person of Christ and his mother. The reservation of these sacraments is not specialized as to its kind, but mon dieu, how distraught was Lucifer to be so palpably tricked by a troisième. Both these matters were, however, personal to the seer, and the lodges, whether red or blue, seem to have been quite unconscious that they have been entertaining divinity and demon unawares. M. Kostka has in fact been distinguished from the common herd of Masons by many favors of Lucifer, and he has naturally been ungrateful, for which I admire M. Kostka. In succeeding chapters, he details at considerable length a variety of hallucinations which experienced on the subject of Helena and Noia, and he has also had visitations of Jansen, of a false Francis Xavier, a false Christ, etc. But his most important experience was that which he terms penetration, commonly experienced in autumn seasons and during the mists and mildness of October nights. On these occasions, he was conscious of a curious extension of personality by which he seems to enter into all nature, and all nature took voice and interpreted herself intelligibly to him. After music came verbal communications, and then the apparition of forms, chiefly of classical mythology. Most people would have termed this poetic rapture passing into lucidity, but our friend avers that it is the enemy. I kind of think of, in the Goetia, Dentalion, except Dentalion is a demon that shows nakedness. So the demon of mental masturbation, apparently.